What would you do if one single decision from your past, just one ruling, one verdict you thought was behind you, suddenly came back to destroy everything you love? What would you do if someone you crossed 20 years ago never forgot you and never forgave you? And tell me, where are you watching this right now? From your living room? From your car on a long drive? Maybe lying in bed, lights off, your phone glowing in the dark. Wherever you are, don't move. Keep listening, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It could be anyone's story. It could even be yours. My name is Richard Hale. For 35 years, I served as a judge. I sat on the bench in some of the toughest courtrooms in California. I believed in fairness. I believed in justice. But justice has enemies. And sometimes those enemies wait. It was the year 1992. I still remember the courtroom, the polished oak benches, the sharp smell of varnish, the hush that fell every time the bailiff said, "All rise." At the center of that trial was a woman named Margaret Collins. Margaret wasn't just an HOA president, she was a queen in her own right. She controlled one of the richest communities in Los Angeles, had friends in politics, and money flowing everywhere. She arrived each morning in sleek cars, wearing diamond jewelry that caught the light, flanked by a team of lawyers who carried her briefcases and whispered strategies into her ear. The case was massive, $3.5 million at stake. Margaret had funneled money through HOA accounts into private deals, used intimidation to force homeowners into contracts, and nearly stolen land from families who had lived there for decades. But the evidence was clear. She was guilty of fraud, extortion, and abuse of power. And when I gave my ruling against her, everything collapsed. She lost millions. Her investors abandoned her. Her reputation was shredded. And as I read that verdict, my eyes rose to meet hers. Cold, burning, eyes that locked on me and whispered without words, "I will remember you. I will make you pay."
But life moved on. Judges make enemies every day. I retired in 2010, left the city behind, and built the home I had always dreamed of by a quiet lake. That house was my sanctuary. The front door was carved from oak, heavy and strong. The ceiling soared high with beams of polished cedar that caught the golden sunlight in the afternoons. The bathrooms were tiled in Italian marble, white and veined with silver, blowing softly under warm lights. My kitchen was a masterpiece of granite counters and mahogany cabinets, everything polished to perfection. And my library was my heart. Thousands of books lined the shelves, law texts, history, literature, even poetry. Every page carried a memory. In the mornings, I sat on the porch with coffee, my golden retriever Max resting at my feet, the breeze carrying the scent of pine from across the lake. For a few years, I truly believed the storms of my life were over. But peace is fragile, and enemies wait. By sheer bad luck, Margaret Collins moved into my town. Not just moved, she took over. She bought land, established a new HOA, and within months, she and her allies sat on powerful boards in city councils. I didn't recognize her at first. Age had sharpened her face, silver streaked her hair, but the fire in her eyes, that was the same. And when our paths crossed at a local event, I felt the chill in her gaze. She remembered me. She remembered the ruling, and now she wanted revenge. It began with small things, but each one cut deeper than the last. The first strike was my garden. One morning, coffee in hand, I walked outside with Max at my side. I froze. Every fruit tree I had planted was gone. 10 trees, each one sawed down to the stump. Clean cuts, professional. Years of care destroyed overnight. The orange tree I had planted on the day I retired, gone. The cherry tree for my late wife, Susan, gone. The apple trees I had promised to my grandchildren, gone. I stood there in silence, my breath caught in my throat, the smell of fresh cuts filling the air. Whoever had done it wasn't careless. This was deliberate. A message. I called the police. 2 officers arrived, young and uninterested. They looked around, scribbled notes. Probably just kids messing around, one said. I shook my head. Kids don't cut 10 trees with precision saws in the dead of night. This was planned. He shrugged. We'll file a report. And that was it. No follow-up. No investigation. Silence. Weeks later came the second strike. I woke one morning to find my car's windshield shattered. Glass glistened like broken ice across the driveway. At first, I thought it was theft, but nothing was missing. Wallet untouched. Keys untouched. This wasn't robbery. It was intimidation. I called the police again. This time, a different officer came. He tapped his pen against his notepad, uninterested. Could be random vandalism. 2 incidents in 1 month, both on my property? Do you think that's random? I demanded. But again, shrugs, empty promises. At night, I began to hear things. A creak on the porch, a shadow crossing the window, whispers in the silence. I started locking the doors twice, closing the curtains tight, sitting awake in the dark with Max at my side, waiting for something to happen. And then, it did. The third strike came as fire. It was past midnight when I smelled smoke. At first faint, then stronger, bitter and sharp. I bolted up, Max barking furiously. I ran downstairs and saw flames licking at the back wall of my house, climbing like hungry fingers. I grabbed the extinguisher, spraying desperately while calling the fire department. Sirens arrived minutes later. Neighbors poured into the street in their robes, watching as firefighters battled the flames. The fire didn't spread far thanks to quick response, but the damage was real. Smoke-stained walls, charred beams, a back deck ruined. One firefighter pulled me aside. "Sir, this wasn't an accident. Someone poured accelerant. Whoever did this wanted your house gone." My stomach turned cold. I looked at the blackened wood, the smoke still curling in the air, and realized this was only the beginning.
The fire should have broken me. It should have made me pack my bags, sell my house, and vanish into another city. That's what she wanted. But I refused. "This is my home," I whispered to myself as I stood in the ruins of the back deck, Max pressed against my leg. And no one, not even her, will drive me out. But defiance has a cost. The fourth strike came swiftly. It was a Sunday morning. The sky was bright, the lake calm, birds scattered in the trees. I went outside to feed Max, who always waited by the porch steps with that wagging tail. But that morning, Max didn't move. He lay stretched out on the grass, chest heaving, his eyes glassy with pain. "Max!" I dropped to my knees, hands trembling as I touched him. His body was limp, his breathing shallow. Beside him lay a small piece of meat, raw, laced with a strange powder. Poison. I screamed for help. My neighbor, Alan, rushed over and drove us straight to the emergency vet. They worked frantically, tubes, injections, machines beeping. I stood helpless, fists clenched, every second tearing me apart. Hours passed before the vet came out, exhausted, sweat on her brow. She said, "We did everything we could. He's alive, but weak. Someone poisoned him deliberately. If you hadn't found him when you did, he wouldn't have made it." My heart burned with rage. Someone had come into my yard, fed my dog poison, and nearly killed the only loyal companion I had left. I knew who it was. I didn't need proof.
Margaret's shadow loomed over every loss, every wound, every scar. But she wasn't done. The fifth strike was the cruelest of all. It wasn't fire, or vandalism, or poison. It was money. One morning, I received a call from my bank. The voice on the other end was polite, but tense. "Mr. Hale, there seems to be suspicious activity on your account. Large withdrawals, unusual transfers." I frowned. "What transfers? I haven't touched my account this week." They explained. Thousands of dollars moved to strange accounts, forged signatures on documents, even my mortgage flagged as defaulted. In one night, my financial foundation crumbled. Bills piled in, letters of foreclosure arrived. Even my pension payments were redirected elsewhere. I went to the bank in person, demanding answers. The manager shook his head. "We have paperwork here, sir. Documents with your signature. If this isn't you, then someone forged them." I stared at those documents, signatures that looked almost like mine, but not quite. Margaret had money, Margaret had power, and Margaret had allies in places most people couldn't reach. Everything I had built, everything I had saved, was under attack. And then came the final blow. Late one evening, as rain hammered the windows, a knock rattled my front door. "Police! Open up!" I froze. Heart pounding, I opened the door to find two officers standing in the storm, faces stern. "Richard Hale?" "Yes." "You're under arrest." The words hit me like a hammer. Arrest? For what? Fraud? Forgery? Misuse of funds? I laughed bitterly. "You can't be serious. I'm the victim here." They didn't care. Cold steel cuffs locked around my wrists. Neighbors peered from their windows as they led me to the squad car, whispers cutting through the rain like knives. At the station, I was booked, fingerprinted, thrown into a cell. My mind reeled. Margaret had done it. She had pulled every string, twisted every wire, and now the hunter had become the hunted. But fate has a strange sense of humor. Because when the case went to court, everything changed. The first hearing was chaos. Margaret arrived with her lawyers, confident, smug, dressed in power. The prosecution painted me as a greedy retiree who had forged signatures for money. But then my name was spoken in that courtroom, and silence fell. Every judge, every advocate, every lawyer in that building knew me. Not just as Richard Hale, but as Judge Richard Hale, a man who had served the courts honorably for 30 years. I saw it in their eyes. Disbelief, suspicion, doubt. 3 hearings stretched across weeks, evidence piled high, accusations thrown like daggers. But slowly, painfully, the truth began to surface. Margaret's fingerprints appeared on documents she swore she had never touched. Surveillance footage showed her associates near my property the nights of the crimes. A hidden witness, one of her own ex-members, came forward with recordings, conversations where Margaret admitted she would ruin the old judge and take back what was stolen. Piece by piece, her empire cracked. And on the final day, the courtroom was packed. Residents from her own HOA filled the benches, whispers rising like waves. When the verdict was read, guilty, gasps echoed through the chamber. Margaret's face twisted in rage, her voice shrieking as bailiffs seized her arms. "You don't understand. This was my town, my city. He ruined me." But the gavel fell, and for once, justice won. Margaret Collins was sentenced to prison. Years of power, wealth, and intimidation crumbled in a single strike. I stood outside that courthouse, the sun breaking through gray clouds. Neighbors, strangers, even former enemies came to me, shaking my hand, thanking me. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Revenge had failed, justice had prevailed, and peace had returned. But let me leave you with this. Enemies don't vanish. They wait. They linger. Sometimes for decades. And when they come, they don't always strike with fists or fire. Sometimes they strike with silence, with whispers, with shadows that creep into your home when you least expect it.